Vida Fuerte. You're watching Women in Art and Las Perlas del Mar News. Today we're with Allyson Mitchelle, an amazing artist and activist in Toronto. Hi, Allyson.
Hi, Emma.
So basically, just tell us about yourself. Who's Allyson Mitchelle?
I am an artist. I make sculpture and film and make environments, installations, and I also teach women's studies at York University. I've done activism and performance around body size and fat acceptance with a group called Pretty Porky and Pissed Off. And a few years ago, I co-edited a book, a collection of writing by young women across Canada about feminism called Turbo Chicks. 2001. Seems like a long, long time ago now, though. Time for a new collection.
Yeah, for sure. So we can continue reading and stuff. I know that you are exhibiting right now a series of sculptures, Ladies Sasquatch.
Yes.
Do you want to speak to us about that?
Yes. I will speak about the Ladies Sasquatch.
Yes.
They are, right now, they were just at Hamilton at the University, McMaster University. And now they're on their way in a truck to Winnipeg Art Gallery, where they're going to be installed in a couple of weeks. And Ladies Sasquatch is a collection of 10 giant lesbian feminist Sasquatch monster sculptures that are they're all around 10 feet tall. And there's 6 of them, and they are modeled using my body and a combination of some poses from Playboy, some images of some found photographs of feral children or children who were supposedly raised by animals, but also some traditional, quote-unquote, traditional images of Sasquatches that are really famous in popular culture, like the famous footage of that Super 8 that's from California from the 1960s, that kind of walking pose of the Sasquatch. So it's kind of a mashup of those 3 things: Playboy, pop culture, images of Sasquatches, and me.
And you. Awesome. And if you don't mind me asking, what exactly does the term Sasquatch mean for the people that don't know?
Well, Sasquatch is an Aboriginal or Native Canadian Indigenous term for around a mythological creature, but it's been kind of co-opted or taken by kind of white mainstream culture in Canada to represent this kind of wild man of the forest, this kind of unknown creature that lurks in the woods, that's undomesticated. And my experience as a white Canadian, any kind of access I had to the Sasquatch was through like really cheesy popular culture, like the $6 Million Man when I was a kid had a visit by the Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and
there was even a show.
So that kind of stuff, which is really, I think, typical of how Native culture gets colonized or gets bastardized and by television and magazines and things like that. So
you've the pose, like each of the sculptures, they all have like different poses and stuff. Do you find that when you were creating them that were you thinking of certain personalities for each of the sculptures, or?
Well, what I was thinking of was trying to represent ways of embodying power through a feminized body. So, it's not like kind of legs crossed, taking up as little space, being dainty as possible.
Kind of like how I'm figuring out.
But they're like, like the arms up in the air, squatting and, thrusting and butt sticking out, and they're not being demure and dainty. They're open. They're open, and it's a way of trying to show that kind of strength, which is a part of women and how we move our bodies, but I think that we get socialized to do the kind of to move our bodies in really polite and socially accepted ways in terms of how women are supposed to move. So they're trying to, the idea of the Sasquatch for me works because it's sort of like trying to play with an undomesticated female sexuality. If we understand, this is going to be like a little bit academic here, but if we understand that how we are, how our genders play out is largely through social construction. Like we learn how to be women, we learn how to be men through school, church, family, etc.
Since little kids.
Yeah, and so then how do we ever how do we imagine what that would be outside of culture? It's not like we can, once we understand that like this, that gender comes through social construction, then someone can come in with like some sort of a hydraulic lift, pick us up out of culture, lift us out and put us over here so we can see what gender looks like outside of culture. But the idea of the wild or untamed, or like cities culture in some ways, but we know the wild is as well. But if we can, one way to try and imagine women's sexuality that's outside of the domestic is to imagine it in a wild space. It's just part of the fantasy around trying to think about like utopias that are different than how we live our lives now. I think that's part of an activist project. If you want to change the world, and you want the world to be different, then you better be able to imagine what that difference would look like. Yeah. And I'm not saying it looks like the Sasquatches, but
it's your vision of it.
Well, it's trying to play with, okay, so if I was raised by she-wolves and like women gorillas in the woods, how would I move my body differently than I do having been raised by a different kind of she-wolf and she-gorillas? My mom and my sister.
And you do work with a lot of textiles, right? So when did you start working with textiles and why? Like what inspired you to start working with textiles?
Well, that's a complicated question. I think I have a lot of craft background in my family. My mom was a brownie leader and was really into crafts, and getting my sister and I to play with making stuff. But she was also a quilter and a crocheter, and my grandma was a quilter as well. So I had a respect for that practice. But it also came out of, and how, as an adult, when I started kind of accumulating textiles, I was doing a lot of thrift store shopping and thinking about kind of alternative trade practices outside of buying new materials, but reusing and recycling materials that have been discarded. And I would find these incredibly beautiful materials in the thrift store, and some of them were handmade, and it just seemed like so strange to me that something that had so much emotion in it, that somebody had put this work into, would end up in basically a junk pile. So I kind of saw it as rescuing, and then as my collection grew, I could see there were some hides, there were some possibilities for hair and butt cheeks and bottoms of feet and things like that. So textiles work really well, I think, too, because of the political messages of my work can be fairly intense or aggressive or subversive. And the material of the textiles that I'm using, these really familiar domestic materials that people would feel comfortable with because they're used to seeing them in homes, it kind of softens the message. It works as a kind of like a trick to ease people into thinking about, like a room size vagina is a room that I created, or to think of a lesbian feminist Sasquatch monster if it looks kind of like a stuffed animal that has its butt is made out of pillows, and you can kind of see like maybe your mom's something looks like your grandma made, that's a needlepoint of a bird as a giant tattoo. The queer dyke message, I don't think it gets dumbed down, but it allows an opening for people to access it rather than it being sort of a shut down and harsh message.